On here for this week's episode of Fearless Flight Live, that show that purports to help people who are afraid to fly, those who know somebody's afraid to fly, and anybody who's just interested in paying attention to the airline industry and seeing what's going on. We had a couple of we had something that went on this week, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. First thing we like to do is to I want to share my screen there. We'll get the slides up there. So first thing is we want to welcome everybody there, and then we'll talk a little bit about our Facebook group. This is our private Facebook group called Birds. Oops. Hi, everybody. This is Capt Ron with our weekly episode of Fearless Flight Live. And we're here for anybody who has a fear of flying, people who know somebody, or people who just want to keep up with what's going on in the industry there. And we start off by talking about our Facebook group, Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather. We're up over 1,300 people now, and the more the merrier. So if you don't know what to do, that's a great place to start, and just by joining our Facebook group. And it's a welcome place for anybody who has a fear of flying, and you can both give and receive tips, pointers, and advice, and our staff keeps track of that too. We look at comments and make comments in there, but when we miss something or we don't see something, sometimes you get better information from some of your fellow fearful flyers out there. Mm-hmm. You may notice tonight is just Dieter and Ron here. We have released the other two people to have Valentine's Day as they chose to see fit, and but we're dedicated. And Dieter is so dedicated. He was eating. How many minutes ago did you leave the restaurant, Dieter? Probably.
I slid in here about 15.
Yeah. I know that it was just a few minutes ago. So yeah. I'm glad you made it, because I need all the help I can get, obviously. Okay, and tonight we have a pretty full show. We're gonna always, the theme is changing the way you think about flying, because that's how you get over a fear of flying. Have a special guest, Emma Williams, who is going to join us here in just a minute, and have some timely topics. One topic in the aviation industry. I'm gonna merge that with my discussion with Emma tonight, and we'll get a fresh fearful flyers response to that. Well, we're going to talk about the 301 graduation flights that we have coming up on March 11th in Boston, and March 25th in the LA area. As always, we welcome your questions, and we'll talk about the monthly live coaching webinar that we have coming up on Thursday. So you won't want to miss that. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Emma to join us. I'm going to kill the screen share there, and come on in, Emma. Emma and I, we Hello. Just met. I think we first talked at the Clear for Takeoff 101 in-person event at Sky Harbor on Saturday night, right? We hadn't met before that. So
no.
Anyway, you were one of the delightfully friendly souls that I always see when I get there. No matter where my anxiety is about public speaking, I always find a safe place to land myself. So you guys give me a chance to practice what I preach there. So we just want to talk a little bit about what got you there. So how did you come to be this? You're not old enough, first of all, to have many life experiences, but I think you do have a couple of children, right?
Yeah. Yes, I have 3 kids. And, I mentioned to the class on Saturday, I have flown my whole life. My mother is Australian, so I've gone over to Australia every year since I was born, and then traveled for work, traveled for fun, seemingly out of nowhere. I had an experience on a flight about 5 years ago, triggered claustrophobia and that type of feeling. And it's just kind of been getting progressively worse since then. I have flown since then, but not often. And my most recent experience was an unsuccessful flight about a month ago. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And so like so many people, you were flying, it was okay, and then all of a sudden it wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's really confusing to a lot of people. And when you say the flight, what happened on the flight that you tried to make?
The one about a month ago,
Yeah.
you know, every time I have travel planned, even, I mean, from the minute I know I have to travel or I'm planning on traveling, it's full on, I mean, thinking about it constantly leading up to the flight. No matter, like, I try and stuff it down. And then with that flight, I showed up to the airport, and it just got heightened as they called for boarding and as we were lining up to get on. And it was just increasingly a 6, a 7, an 8, a 9, to the point where I got on. And I just felt like I was at a 10. It was honestly an out of body experience. It almost felt like I had no choice but to get off. Like I had to, I had to, there wasn't an option. So I got off and felt relief instantly, but shortly after that came the flood of all the other feelings associated with that.
Right.
You know,
and that's I'm sure with everybody, you and I talked, and I thought, it's always, I think, much more interesting, rather than hear me talk, it's much more interesting talking to people like you. And in particular, I like to have people who are just kind of starting the process. And so this is going to be, I want you to feel free to ask questions, and we'll do a little mini coaching session here.
Great.
And so what happens is when you get off, you get a big shot of dopamine, and that part of your brain that says, we successfully cheated death. And and that's what makes it harder to get on the next time. So obviously, was that, had you been working on the fear before that, or you just kind of accepted it and bludgeoned your way through it, or how were you flying before?
I was trying different things, like, I would read things online, like, why am I claustrophobic? Like, what is this? And try to kind of find an answer for like why. But nothing helped. And I actually, the few times like I had to fly, we moved out to Phoenix from Ohio. I had to take medication to fly, which, I have children. It's not really an option for me to just zonk out on a flight. So that's not a viable path for me. And I really just, more time passed in between each flight. And I think that just let this fear snowball. And I avoided flying on a lot of different things. I would, we would drive, I would just really put it off unless I had to. And this recent time was the first time that I actually couldn't complete a flight. And so, of course, currently I still am feeling like, oh gosh, like it's reached its peak, and is this it? Like how do I overcome this?
Yeah. Well, pat yourself on the back for having the courage to step up. The average person waits about 10 years or endures about 10 years before they do something. So, but they get to the place where you are kind of, you get sick and tired of being sick and tired of not being able to do it comfortably and all that. Yeah. And for, what are the reasons you fly? Is it totally joy, vacation, family? What
all of it. I fly for work. Especially now I work remotely for an Air Force base that's based in Dayton, Ohio. So I am supposed to be going back there once a quarter. I am supposed to be flying out to Seattle to the Boeing, the plant there. So I do travel for work. If I didn't weasel my way out of a few trips, I should be traveling probably every other month for work. So it's a problem, like from a career standpoint, it's like, it's just not an option. I can't drive to Dayton, reasonably. So work is definitely a big, aspect for me, but also my family is not all around me. I have family all over the country. I have family in Australia. want to travel. And so, yeah, the pleasure vacation aspect of it is definitely also, equally important to me.
So you work for the Air Force and you can't get in the air.
I know. It's like,
Just out of curiosity, it sounds like the pandemic, you were allowed to work from home, like a lot of other, but, and then since it's on the ebbing side now, are you back to where you need to fly more?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's pretty much no restrictions on when people travel, the amount of people that are traveling for various, meetings.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm kind of like, I have not disclosed this fear to many people. Like, I'm sure that must be common. And so I kind of find creative ways to say, like, I can support that virtually, when really, like, I want to be there and I would get more out of it and it would be more beneficial if I was there.
Sure.
So that's a challenge that, if I didn't have this fear, I wouldn't, I would be able to be there.
Okay. Well, and what's, you mentioned, it just got more and more overwhelming. And so I'm going to say, what was the trigger? What was it? Was it a thought? Was it a feeling? Was it a combination? What was it that said, I got to get off?
Yeah. The flight that it all happened. And, like we talked about, it truly was felt like a 2x4 smack in the face. I had never felt any sort of claustrophobia or I don't like tight spaces ever in my life. And my husband and I were sitting on a flight to Miami. It was the first flight after having my daughter. We left her behind and we were going on a vacation. So I know, like you had mentioned, there could be a biological aspect there.
Right.
But we were kind of near the back of the plane and the flight was so uneventful that I don't even remember a single thing about the flight. But when we pulled in to get deplane, and that seatbelt light went off and everyone stood up, all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, it was like a ton of bricks, just, 0 to 100. And I actually it was so unexpected that I think that is what sticks with me, is because I'm like looking over one shoulder, like, when is that going to happen again? And so that feeling is the same feeling that has just grown, like it's going to happen again. I'm going to feel that way again. And it's now not at the end of a flight. It's gotten to the point where I can't even get on the flight. So it's just really grown.
So more claustrophobia and just noticing the close in. So, and what you said, people are crazy when we get to the gate. Everybody gets up and nobody's going until the people in front of them go.
Yes.
And it amazes me because and I can't tell you the number of people that have shared their anxiety about flying like you have, that is a trigger. That when they're sitting in the airplane and everybody stands up, and for some reason you now feel like you're I don't know, maybe an ant in the forest and you can't get through the trees, or what, I don't know, would be a good metaphor, but it is, it's a trigger. So the things that, when I work with people and the classes and everything, the first step is to tell your story and then look for the triggers. And so that's one of them. And as you mentioned, trying to figure out why this happened and all that. And you and I were discussing the other day how I love to delve and look at insights in people's minds and things like that. But the truth of the matter is, you don't have to have insight to get over this.
Yeah.
The thing that is the most freeing for people to overcome their fear flying is some kind of an action step. And I read a book the other day, and she calls them micro yeses. Not going from a 10 to a 1, but a 10 to a 9. And doing something. So we could play with the whole thing now that that people are likely to all stand up like that, and you can't control necessarily sitting in the front on the aisle all the time.
Right.
So you'll inevitably end up back there, depending on what the airline and what their seating policies are and all that, and when you book the flight. But so help me. We'll just play with this for a minute. What would be a strategy? What could you do or think of? The next time you get ready to deplane and all these people are gonna stand up, probably. What could you do?
I have tried to not look at everybody
Okay.
standing there and kind of
Okay.
look at the seat in front of me, or, try and just not look at it.
Okay.
And I like wear headphones to try and somehow just escape the reality of what the situation is until it's time to get up and get off, and maybe that will pass the time. Because seconds, when I'm in that, when that has happened to me, seconds feel like hours, know. And it's just like the worst feeling.
So here's a suggestion. It's kind of like leaning into it instead of trying to do something anti that. Like, so it may be crazy, but just start looking at people and see how many people you can count.
Okay.
It's
like
crazy,
on the,
right? So you just say, okay, your task is no longer to sit there and wait. Your task is to count everybody you can before they leave. All right.
Okay.
And see if you can count how many people that you could count in front of you that you had to wait for before you could get out there. Okay. And it sounds like the antithesis of what you think would help.
Right.
But it's one of those things, this lady that I was listening to her podcast the other, she's a PhD psychologist and has a practice and all that. And she works with people with trauma. And one of the comparisons, she said, we try to do things like breathe and all that. And she said, for the most part, in the moment, if for people it just turn to meditation, stuff like that, never works. Never
really
works. And that's what I've seen as
well.
Now, that doesn't say don't breathe, because I tell people to breathe, but for the most part. And she says, think of like a 7-year-old who's having a meltdown. Okay.
Right.
Can you imagine telling, I don't know how old your kids are, but you can imagine telling them, okay, just breathe.
Calm down.
There's no way, because they're overloaded, and we are like that. We are little people in big people's bodies at that motion. Yeah. And I invited you to come on Thursday to the coaching, our next coaching webinar. And that's the kinds of things we're going to talk about. And I hope I get at least some willing people to share with that, because working with somebody like you live is so much easier than me sitting here trying to espouse all these techniques and lists of 10 things you can do and all that. Because in real time, and I've never told anybody to stand up and count everybody, and it may not work. It may blow up in my face, and you say, "Well, that was the dumbest thing you could have done wrong." But what'll happen more often than not is you'll think of a better idea, So and I have the typical things that I can do, like have your partner tell you to, give you a little spelling test, only now you got to spell every word that he gives you backwards.
That's a good idea.
Just anything to actively engage your mind and keep it away from it. And it's got to be something that's more interesting than what your mind wants to do with it. Right. So anyway.
Yeah. Is that because it feels in the moment like impossible to try and get break that thought process when in my mind, right? Like what's happening is like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Oh my God, I got to get out. And so do you truly have to just how do you force yourself to be spell words backwards? You just have to
the reason I say an action step is because if I tell people to think of something, think of that, it usually doesn't work, because that screaming voice in your head dominates. It's literally like somebody putting their face up to your ear and just yelling at you. Okay. Yeah. So that's why I talk to people about the harmonizer. If you're stuck there yourself, turn it on, turn it up, and blast your ears. Like maybe your kids could do with whatever music your kids annoy you with. Get some of their music and take it with you on the airplane.
That's a good idea.
And again, it's not like you're trying to block what your inner voice is. You're trying to go louder than that. Yeah. And that's why I say, tell people to surrender to the fact that you can't control it. Yeah. And go with it. Yeah. Be a 7-year-old, say, oh, you want to play like that? Okay, watch this. I'm just going to do this and this and this. Okay. Right. But it's a great point. You really, none of us, even I, if I get startled by something in that moment, there's nothing that's going to displace that thought from my head. It's there and I'm stuck with it. So all I can do is just accept the fact And if there are feelings associated with it, you kind of got to go with those as well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that there are a number of really leading trauma therapists out there now. There's 4. There's a guy named Bessel van der Kolk, and he talks about or body memories for people who've been traumatized. And so he does like, and every one of these 4 that I'm thinking of right now, they all talk about body movement, doing something with your body. So that's another one. So in that moment, instead of standing up, like everybody trying to get, you might just, stand up and put some
tension or something.
Put some tension on. And so it's like right now, I've just got my knees slightly bent, but I can't do this forever because it's going to get tiresome. But do that so that now what I'm noticing is I'm noticing a little bit of strain in my eyes. They're all tightened up like that,
Yeah.
And so body movement can be a good thing too. So you go into a yoga position, it's your own. You're the teacher and everything. But you just do that, and people might look at you and think you're weird or whatever. But you say, okay, I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to feel all the stress of standing like that. Okay. So if you and I tell people, if this happens to you and you're in the gate area, get up and walk.
Yeah.
And when you're walking, you can do a walking meditation. You can count the tiles. You can step, see how many it goes. If you got big tiles, how many it takes to get to the crack. Can you walk without stepping on a crack? I think that's a neurosis for some people. Like I remember Jack Nicholson in the book As Good as It Gets. He does that. I don't know if you remember that movie. But the funny thing was the dog does it in the end. The dog is avoiding the cracks too. Step on a crack, break my back. I think So anyway, but those are the things that there's just so many out there, but we don't think about those because as you said, your brain gets dominated. Your mind gets dominated. And it fixes on, oh my God, those people, I'm feeling more claustrophobic. And I think when people stand up like that, it just makes sense that it's like all of a sudden they fill the space. Yeah. And you say, there's no place for me. Yeah. Yes. But there is. There's just as much room for you as there was before. Right. But not in the mindset that you're in. Yeah. So anyway. Yeah. So those are great things. Those are things to do. That's the goal. That's what we're going to talk about Thursday night is hopefully we'll get more people that can share what happens to them and we can come up with some solutions to that. And I love groups. And that's why I love doing this group coaching thing, because you get more people and you get more ideas and you get more creativity going. You know? And somebody will say something that I didn't think of and it'll work for somebody. And somebody said, oh, that sounds like a good idea, I like the Facebook group for that because you can see people writing in think they made it through a flight and they had this feeling and this is what they did to get through it. And those stories are very powerful and helpful because it's like somebody felt like I feel and they managed to overcome it. And so it like I felt on Saturday with those people, for the first time, just hopeful, because there is a sense of really sad, hopelessness tied to having a fear like this, where you're well, I guess this is my lot in life. It feels like that. Yep. And that's why the definition I use, I kind of adapted from trauma. And that is, it's a situation, circumstance, or event that triggers you. And and you feel, it feels life-threatening. And maybe not life-threatening where you're going to lose your life, but life-threatening in the sense that you feel overwhelmed. Yes. And you like claustrophobia. You're not worried about dying literally per se, but you're worried about not being able to breathe or something like that. Yeah. Combined with feelings of helplessness. Yeah. And that's it. So trauma and fear of flying have virtually share the same definition. Right. So, So anyway, I wanted to see. So you went to the the 101 class. You want to share for anybody who can get to Phoenix and go to the 101 class? What was your experience there? Just real quick. It was so great. I didn't know if I'd be the only one there, how many people would be there. And we had a group of people that all had, different stories, but we were all connected and bonded over this same,
thing that's holding us back. And it's almost like all of us in one way or another have like reached rock bottom to the point where we're like, it's only up from here. And there were everyone had different reasons. And so that was very, very powerful to be like, why are you here? You know, and what have you missed out on, or what are you worried about missing out on? And then honestly, for me, like getting on a plane, going through the gate, going through like security, that area, and then walking down that dreaded tunnel to the plane, which is highly triggering. I mean, I was one of the ones with, I think, one other person that was hard for me to even walk down that thing, even though I knew I wasn't flying anywhere. It just elicited such that response immediately. So getting on there and just sitting on a plane, like I like being exposed to that in a way that then I was able to be on there. We sat on there for quite a while and talked, and I forgot I was on a plane. And I started picturing in my mind, like, okay, if I was sitting in this seat and we were flying, like, you know, this is where I could actually feel what that would feel like. And so that, I don't know where else you can go to kind of get on a plane and, you know, simulate it as best as possible without actually booking a flight, you know? Yeah.
And the key, I think, again, you said, you know, eventually you were able to regain control over your attention and think about something else. And that's it. When you could do that, you know that you're on the right track, because it's fear flying, if nothing else, it's an attention disorder in that you can't, once your attention gets hijacked, it's hard to pull it back to where you get to think about what you choose to think about. And that's why when everybody stands up in the airplane, we got to find something that you can find interesting. And it may be just finding anybody that has nose hair or ear hair. I mean, the craziest thing, it doesn't matter. And I can't wait to hear the stories, because that's what I love when people write back to me. It's, you know, who doesn't like to say, hey, Capt Ron, you help me. What I really like hearing is I counted nose hair on the thing. And I'm going to put that out there so everybody can.
I mean, the people watching on a plane is like top notch. There's
my gosh,
you know, like that's the best place. That's like Vegas.
And watching them vie for position, right? I mean, you know, and almost kill somebody pulling their suitcase out rather than take their time. You know, I mean, you know. I mean, I've seen some heavy duty clunking with people. Their suitcase got away from them and hitting people. So if nothing else, you want to watch to defend yourself. So anyway, well, let me move on real quick. I'm gonna share my screen here, and I want to talk about this because I asked you if you knew, and you had not heard about this. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put my screen back up there. And I'll put this. There was and
I think we're seeing your OneNote, Ron.
Not. Oh no, that's not fair. Come on. Yeah, but I know it disappeared behind me. There we go. Okay, so one of our followers alerted this to me because I had not heard about it yesterday. Today, I saw it in the news. Okay. So this is what you don't want to do. You don't want to be in an airplane where somebody then later writes a headline, United flight plummets to 775 feet above the ocean in a terrifying 45-second dive. Okay. So would you notice this in the media? Well, you didn't so far, but when you notice this, how would that affect you, Emma?
That would be very not comforting for me to read. Even though my fear is more not about the mechanics. I know we talked about that it's got to be both. If there's a fear, you know, they have to somehow be tied together. And so seeing this, I would be telling myself, you know, one flight out of how many fly a day, that's how I would be trying to justify it in my mind, is somehow minimizing what this is in the big picture of flight, I guess. Not that would help, but that's what I would try to do.
if you saw a headline there that said 100 people died yesterday in traffic accidents, would that have the same effect, or would you be, which one would get your attention?
The flight, 100%.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't even think in those terms, right? I mean, if we killed 100 people a day in an airline, I guarantee you, nobody would be flying. I mean, first of all, there wouldn't be anybody to be buying tickets, but second of all, the government would ground every airplane out there. Okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway. So I'm going to resist the temptation that all pilots fall into, and that's second guess what happened here, because we're going to wait. We're going to wait and see what the NTSB does. I am going to talk about some things that hopefully be interesting. Maybe you guys will all fire me after we get done with this. I don't know. But so here, and I just wanted a couple of things. One, the media. Okay. I'm not anti-media. They have to do a job. They report and things like that. But just know the things that you don't know every day in the news that happen somewhere. Okay. And when we don't know, ignorance is bliss, I say, and I'm one of the happiest people I know. So, okay. But so now they got a graphic. This is what happened. Okay. Now I guarantee you, on a scale of this guy going to 35,000 feet eventually, this is way out of proportion. It would be just a little burp and then it would go up. And again, I don't want to minimize it because something happened on this flight, and I'll give you more of the details here in just a minute. It was raining. There was some weather right out. What they did, they were flying from Maui to San Francisco, and it was right after takeoff. So it says they were a couple thousand feet into the air, 2,200 feet. It says there. So that's going to be, it probably took them 30 seconds, maybe a minute to get there. And so it was right after takeoff. And then people, I believe if we could get one of the people who were on there, they felt their tummy get light, and they felt the airplane pushing over like that. And then it went down, and then it's like if you've ever been on a big roller coaster where you go up that first hill, click, 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 click,
Yes.
click, click, click,
That's
click,
what,
and then you
that's
go
what I'm
down.
thinking.
And it was probably that looks like a 50-60 degree dive. I guarantee you the airplane did not go down 60 degrees. It probably went down like 10 degrees. Okay. But when you're going down and you're feeling that little bit of weightlessness, the sensation is frightening. And they had of course they always do. They found the first guy that came out of the airplane that was willing to talk. They interviewed him in one of the articles I read, and he elucidated on what it was. And he talked about, I was really scared, but I didn't want to show it for my kids and all that. So I'm here to tell you that if I were on this flight in the back, I would be apprehensive if what happens appears to be what happened. Okay. The airplane recovered, they went on, and then he made a comment in here. The one guy said the pilots came on, somebody came on and said, whoops, we're all under control, and then they went on their way. Now, we get a lot of training in aviation about how to handle things that go wrong. The one thing that we don't talk about much is, what if you make a mistake and you realize that you made a mistake, and people on board the airplane have an experience over it, okay? And I'm here, in this day and age, it's like we are not a forgiving culture, okay? No. So you can see that in politics. If people make mistakes, even if they own up to it, somebody's going to judge them. So I don't know what those pilots went through, but I'm just grateful. This is what I do every day. I say, thank goodness I never had a mistake that became public. I made mistakes, but they were some that didn't have consequences. So what I hope to leave everybody with tonight is we'll talk a little bit about being human stuff. We have a program. And so when these guys got back, well, here, let me go to the next slide here. So they got an expert from Embry-Riddle University, of course, and he says, well, I think this happened and the thing could be the autopilot, and they switched it on at the wrong time, or they had the wrong altitude in there. It could very well have been like that. And somebody knows right now what happened, because when they go back and get the flight data recorder, they can see it. And not only that, they probably knew it right after they took off, because we now have a data link. So now the airplane sometimes gives reports even while you're in flight. Yeah. Okay. So the one thing that they will do, and the pilots, we have a program, like it or not, from a passenger's point of view, we have a program. If you make a mistake, you can tell on yourself. So, and they made a point in the articles They said, and the pilots went back and filled out a report. And then they were given some additional training. So if I make a mistake, and even if it wasn't public, it didn't cause anybody else to notice that something was different, I can go back and I can write that up. And this is one of the reasons why aviation is so safe, because I can tell on myself and I will not be punished if it wasn't willful or intentional. All right. Now, doesn't mean that they won't train me, they won't brief me, but what it does is now, one of the problems with aviation is when you're so safe, you don't have accidents anymore. It's hard to predict when the next accident will be and what it will be about. So by telling on ourselves, we give planners and researchers a way to predict if we have areas. So what they'll do, first thing they'll do is they'll look at this, and if there are other reports like that, maybe they'll see something in training that these guys, that normally wouldn't come up, but these guys were set up, and they'll look around and they'll see if that's an issue throughout the airline or the industry, then they'll come up with a plan to change that. Maybe it was a malfunction, or the way they set it in. They did everything according to training, but it was the first time that something happened, but it could happen again. Okay. And maybe it was just these guys made a mistake. So it doesn't indicate a trend. It's just a one-off type of a thing. But then everybody will be debriefed on that, like I said, the guys will get training on that. So I'm not going to play what happened, and because I don't know, really don't know. And pilots are the worst. We love to judge our peers and say, "Wow, those idiots! This is what they did wrong," and all that. Okay, and so that's kind of what I wanted to do, to kind of model for when you get out there. If something happens like that in the news, I would rather have people send me a link, let me take a look at it, and then get some more information and give it back to them. Okay. Because it's just like when you got on the airplane and your feelings start to overwhelm you, you can't ignore them. You can't stick your head in the sand and not notice articles in the paper. This is going to be written up a little bit more. I can guarantee you that. Yeah. And then when they come out with what happened, it depends on how blatant they are. People will get upset about that too. We do make mistakes. Part of human factors, the program that has really, really dramatically changed the airlines, is to admit that we make mistakes. Yeah. Because up until the middle of my career, the official thing with the FAA, who regulates us, was to be perfect. Now how stupid does that sound in this day and age? Yeah. But that's the way aviation was for the first 75 years. Okay. And then we said, you know what? Better than being perfect and lying to yourself, it's better to, when you make mistakes, first try to catch them before they become problematic. And second, try to overcome them and manage around them. So anyway, okay. So thanks for being my guinea pig here tonight. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm going to ask Dieter to come back in here and see. Occasionally we have some questions from people watching for you, and I don't know if we got comments or anything, Dieter.
There was just one question, like what type of plane it was, and yes, it was a 777-200, I believe. And the other question was, it kind of like falls in the realm of speculation. Whether or not that descent, to you anyways, what does Capt Ron think about the rate it was going down? So at the rate they were going down, would that obviously still be a rate that's...
it was in excess of 8,000 feet a minute. So that means for every minute, you lose 8,000 feet altitude. I flew an airplane. I could point the nose at the ground. I could go down at 20,000 feet per minute. Okay. But it was intentional. and I started it way up high so that I didn't go all the way to the earth. Okay. So you would notice, what they noticed, I'm sure what they noticed is the unloading of the G-force. So they noticed getting light in the seat when the airplane pushed over the top. And then when the airplane inevitably, when they terminated that descent, they pulled down up. And you felt heavier in your seat. So those are the two things. And anybody's listened to me at any time, that I tell you, there's sights, sounds, and sensations on an airplane that you can't duplicate anywhere else. And the sensations are the ones that I think trigger most people. Okay.
Mhm.
Even though it wasn't the airplane changing in your case, Emma, but when the people get up, it's the sensation looking around you can feel the airplane move when that many people get up all at once, and you can see that. And those are the things that trigger most flyers because you're working in the third dimension.
Right.
So I can guarantee you that some of those people were frightened on that airplane, and I doubt whether the one guy they interviewed said, and people began to scream. There might have been an occasional scream. Most often, people don't say squat; they just go, "I hope this works out." Yeah. People don't. The old airplane movie, they said, they have a scene where it says, assume the crash position, and everybody throws themselves all over the airplane. It's like that. People don't scream in panic. Typically, they typically freeze, and that's why flying is so difficult for people that are afraid of it, because you can't fight. There's no point. You can't flee. There's no place to go. The only thing you can do is freeze. So we call it the fight or flight response, but it's really the freeze response that provides that chest tube where you can just compress this poor person in there. So anyway, one
more thing I wanted to mention, and I think you guys have talked about it a couple times, but I think, Emma, the one thing that's becoming clear is that it is the practice that you invest in yourself before you ever get to the airport, that will make the difference. And whether that is, for example, for you, one of the things, being fortunate and sitting in that stationary airplane, really having had some time to kind of, absorb it in a non-flight situation, is for you to kind of visualize, so to speak, what that was like sitting there and with all the other people, and just like you said, and then really envision the parts like walking on the jetway and these kinds of things with the breathing, because it is true. I mean, there's not a lot of hope for somebody to even be able to count to 4 when their biology has taken them over. But the point is, we prepare for when we actually get on the plane, and not just leave it to that last second.
And fear of flying, unlike if you come upon a snake, you back off. If you see a spider, you go like that, you recoil. You can get away. You can get instant relief by virtue of the circumstance. If you got a wolf and you're out in the woods, that's a little bit more challenging, and you get more of it. But an airplane, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. You can go from 0 to 180,000 miles an hour in a heartbeat just because you don't know what to do in that moment. And so Dieter pointed out, so what I found, this is the biggest gift I've gotten over the 35 years from working with people like you, is you got to find something to do with your attention when you're faced with that. You can't anticipate that. Those people couldn't anticipate that, and when you're in that situation, you're basically, you got to ride, you're a passenger. Okay. But when you get done and preventing that, the thing that bothers me the most is if those pilots could have got up out of the seat at the end of that flight and told people, you know what, we need to tell you, we need to explain what happened. We had some, and I used to think about this myself. How can I phrase a mistake in a way that doesn't make me look like an idiot and further damage them, But telling, what it's like if you've ever had an argument with your spouse, telling coming clean is such a healthy thing to do. But I guarantee you, there's a bunch of people on that airplane that now that all they'll remember is, oh my God, that was traumatic for me. So like Dieter said, so Thursday night, we're and if you look at the theme that we've got, we're continuing to look at fear of flying 911, what to do when you don't know what to do, because we'll never get done coming up with ideas. We need anybody out there that's interested. I told the class there that Emma was with the other night, if you don't know what to do, then just come to one of the monthly coaching sessions. It's $47 or $37 It's a really low entry fee, and you're going to get ideas. You're going to get a feel for whether you even like us at Fearless Flight. You're going to see if anything makes sense, and you're going to connect with other people who, like Emma said, who are in the same boat with you. So that's the number one thing I would say. We wanted to remind everybody. We got the Clear for Takeoff 301, the actual graduation flights coming up in Boston on March 11th, and in
Burbank
LA
on March 25th.
March 25th. So come back, ask us, if you got questions or whatever like that, and come back next week for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. Emma, thanks for being my guinea pig once again. Thanks for being so brave. This is what inspires me to do this, is seeing people like you who do not have to fly. You can give up your job. You can, you can let your family go, but flying, when people come to the airport like you, I know that's real courage. And Dieter, thanks. Dieter's had the courage to hang in there with me for God knows how many years now. And he hasn't killed me yet, that's a major contribution. Anyway, so thanks everybody. I hope this is you've heard something that was of interest. Tell everybody else about this. Tell them to come back to the show. Come online to fearlessflight.com, and we hope to see you again next week. So thanks, Emma.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
Dieter.
you.
Talk to you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.